some of the men who are in the red pill community who are upset and hurting is because they are delusional around their behavior, right? They are delusional in why it didn't work out, right? So he could be absolutely overweight, making, almost no money, right? He's living in the basement of his parents' home and the entire floor is covered with Cheeto dust. He's filthy, right? And he decides to, entertain a relationship with a woman who's clearly out of his league. He's a 5, she's a 10. Maybe he catches her at a time where she was sick of how all of the other 8s treated her. And so she decides to give him a bit of a chance, but he can't maintain her. Mm-mm. He doesn't have, and when I say she's a 10, I don't mean in a superficial way. She can be educated, fit, physically fit. She has a spiritual life. She meditates. She's well-rounded, right? She doesn't have to be superficial, but she could be an 8, 9, 10 in her own right. He is a 5. He doesn't exercise. He's not able to take care of himself, right? He is reliant on his parents. He's not clean. He doesn't practice cleanliness. And over time, she recognizes that he has a little bit of a sour odor and things of that nature. It's just completely unpleasant. And maybe she's not even rude or disrespectful. Maybe this one is actually clear. I don't want a relationship with you because she recognizes you cannot mentally stimulate me. I'm not mentally stimulated by you. Our conversations are very rudimentary. You cannot lead me spiritually. You don't have a relationship with God. You're not physically fit. She could be exceptionally fit. This, sweetheart, I appreciate all the time that we've had together. This is not going to work. He's seething mad because he didn't acknowledge the fact that he's being delusional. So we have a conglomerate of men from all walks of life, some who are reasonably upset and some many who are delusional. And they're sharing this space of hurt around where they felt that women have failed them, but they all probably have the same thing in common. They do not understand women. They won't take the responsibility for that. What they'll rather do is when they come into understanding some things about women, they demonize it. As an example, they'll hear things like women just want attention. Women just want money. Women need resources. Women are vulnerable in their physiological body, hormonally. We have 1 week where we have a great surge of testosterone. The other weeks we're all over, right? We're just holding on. So women, every woman has a rhythm and men do not know that. Every woman has a rhythm. So when a man says that women are confusing, that is a man who doesn't understand a woman because every woman has a rhythm. And if you studied your woman, you would understand her pattern and her rhythm. You'd know okay, she must be about a week out from her cycle hitting because she is irritable, right? Or she's super quiet. So she must be low on energy because her cycle is coming around, or she is super hot. Her hair is thick, her skin looking good, her breasts are perkier, she ovulating, right? She's ovulating, she's in the mood. So when a man studies a woman's rhythm, he'll better understand. Any man that doesn't understand women is a man who just has not taken the time to understand her rhythm. So what they are doing is they're entering in these relationships with this notion that I want what I want. I want a woman, a beautiful woman sitting across from me that I can look at. I want the softness and tenderness of her energy. I want her smiles. I want the sex, right? I want the intimacy. I want the softness and plushness of her body. I want people to know that I'm with a baddie. So when I come out the car, he's like, that's you? That's you right over there? He wants that experience. But he doesn't understand there's a cost for that. Can you afford that cost? You need to be rich in your mindset, in your pocket, in your spirituality. You need to be full. You need to come into a relationship full. You can't come into the relationship empty, needing, I just need a woman to help me get on my game, and I just need a woman to help me out and things like that. Okay, and keep on keeping on and see what happens. So those are the men that are in that group with the Red Pill Society, and they are 100%, majority of them are insecure, and majority of them are absolutely hurt. I know men, I have coached men who've actually come out of Red Pill Society because they realize that so I had one client that I'm thinking of in particular where he said, I went out and I did the things that they said to do, And I found myself still hungering, and like I had an insatiable appetite and desire for a relationship, a real relationship. All of that, he lost count of how many women he ran through, lost count, and realized it didn't satisfy me. Right. So there are men who are coming out of it because they realize that this is still not giving me what I want. I want family. Red pill society is not going to give you family. If you are a man and you want family, red pill society is not it. Okay? It's not going to provide. Red pill society is going to appeal to your ego. You're going to find that you're going to come up short every time.
And also, just because you have sex with a lot of women, you have to look at the other side of that. That is basically how much time you wasted
Indeed.
away from your purpose. So 10 women could have been 10 years or 10 minutes or 10 hours that you could have been doing what you're supposed to do to get the woman that you actually want and actually deserve. So
it looks like to me that you seem physically fit, well-spoken, right? And I did hear you say something that let me know that you are on a healing journey. You said a keyword, you said shadow work. So that was my clue into recognizing, okay, he must be on a healing journey or has, touched upon that. You talked about meditation. These are some things that, a lot of is becoming mainstream, but a lot of people don't know about that. So I'm curious about your journey and like how you've seemed to become into your masculinity and grown, and like what triggered you to change? Like where were you before, and like how did that manifest over time?
I'll skip over like the super traumatic stuff.
Okay.
But for me, women have always been very just easy to obtain. So I didn't find value in them. So not finding value in them, it's always like they just became like shells, just shells and shells of just like.
Ooh, child, you was trying to fill them up. Lord have mercy. Right.
Shells of graveyards in the cemetery, basically.
Right.
So with that, I can relate to what you said with the person going out and just feeling empty. And after feeling empty, I gravitated towards women that were abusive.
Wow.
Because they were able to make me feel outside of physical. But the abuse was more like mental and emotional and like verbal. And I thought that was my karma for all the stuff that I had done.
Got it.
So not until therapy did I realize that wasn't healthy and that's not going to get me to where I wanted to go.
Right.
So when I started my therapy journey, it was more or less figuring out the root of like, where did I get that feeling of just not being whole or not feeling lovable, of not feeling deserving of like an emotional connection.
Indeed.
Because just all the sex, there was no connection behind it. It was just physical and just ego and machismo, like you said. So not until I got to like a certain point where I wanted to realize what the problem was. So accountability and, acknowledging there is a problem and taking the step, finding the proper therapist. Because just because you go to therapy, just because you find a therapist, they may not be the one for you.
Right.
And going to multiple therapists is okay.
Yep.
Like you have to figure out who you're willing to give your shit to and feel safe giving that shit to them. That's very important. Because I did get frustrated with the amount of therapists I went to. Like they're just not understanding me. And so when I found somebody that I felt comfortable with, it's just like everything just opened. And I found out like what my issues were. And I had to put a pause on a lot of things, mainly the sex. Like for me, like sex was just really addicting because it was just easy. And it was just like, all right, it was just, even though it wasn't fulfilling emotionally,
right,
it was just very easy. And it just kind of masked the things that were going on and just was just
dopamine hits.
Yes. Just constant. Sorry, I said that. It was kind of a lot of sex.
Right.
But while doing so, like I was still in relationships and I would have to kind of like withdraw, but I would have to figure out like why I was withdrawing. And then when I figured out like this person wasn't my person,
right,
I got deeper into therapy. And the more she said, you have to figure out like what you want to do with your life. Like that's how I discovered like what purpose was, like what outside of this, like what drives me, like what am I passionate about, like what are my goals.
Beautiful.
And then when I figured out like how long I hadn't been paying attention to those goals and like my actual passion, then it's almost like a switch. I just turned everything off.
Mhm.
And then learning about being able to sit with myself and like taking the Friday and Saturday off instead of like being out, getting drunk and doing shit that I enjoy doing, still enjoy doing.
Right.
But just taking that time to myself and really sitting and crying. Like
Yeah.
just really crying over like the hurt that I've gone through, the hurt that I caused.
Mhm.
And from that point trying to figure out like how I can correct some things and like how I can change some things, like how I can fix and like what's not fixable.
Mhm.
And then working from there, just like step by step by step by step, and then realizing the things that I thought I was going to miss the most, I didn't miss as much because I was getting so much more into myself and like figuring out more that I liked outside of sex.
Yeah.
And from that point, it was just like, yo, you know what? Let me work out too. Let me throw that on. Because I told him last time, like, go to the gym, pick up a book. But like the third step was really just about self mastery.
Yes.
Just what can you live without and what are you willing to sacrifice to become like your higher self?
Mm-hmm.
And then that led me towards like meditation. And then I got like into like chakras and Reiki and just like sound baths and all types of stuff. And it just became like this just like
rabbit hole
of
Yeah.
things. And it replaced. So it was almost like switching your vices, but making my vice more positive.
Right.
And then seeing the people that were still around from my positive vices,
Mm-hmm.
or seeing the people that I picked up from my positive vices. And ironically, not really ironic, but I feel that women find me way more attractive without me really speaking or saying too much.
Mm-hmm.
The effort that I had to do, which was even still minimal,
Mm-hmm.
not being like cocky or anything, but
Right.
just the types of women that I would meet, like just, I'm into older women, but the older women that I would meet.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay, Usher.
yes. And then that the older women like had experiences. And I felt like, wow, you must see something in me that you want to experience with me and like share these with me. And so that made me feel worthy. But I felt actually worthy within myself to feel deserving of that. And before I didn't, it was more like, oh, she just sees me as this item and just object, arm candy or whatever.
Right.
So from there, them seeing something in me and then like speaking to, I actually spoke to this famous photographer who gave me like this big brother talk.
Mm.
And he asked me, he was the first man to ever ask me like what I wanted to do.
Mm.
And this is in my 30s. He was like, what do you want to do with your life? And that question just like, I just sat there. I was just like, and then I took that home and like those Fridays and Saturday nights that I just sat with myself, I thought about it and I just devised a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did another photo shoot and I gave him an answer. And he was like, that's cool. Now apply it.
Mm.
So it was the lessons and then like the application.
That part.
So after all that, I just found so much peace.
Do you feel like you're more authentic now?
Super authentic. But I also feel like with the whole authenticity thing that people want to see one side of you.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I feel like that's all that they can digest at a time. So when you try different things
Mm-hmm.
and like go out on a limb to do what makes you happy, I think that's where the quote unquote hate and the criticism comes from. But if you're doing it,
that would be the vetting.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when you're doing it from like a place of like, listen, this is just what I feel like doing,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I tell them every time I come here, like, yo, I don't really go in the comments,
Right.
or if the comments come to me like and they're on some homosexual stuff that I'm not into,
Right.
if they're like that, then I'll just block them. Or if I see something I don't like, I just block.
Right.
Or I just restrict or delete because like I don't give any more energy to that.
Right.
And I just keep doing what I do. And I feel like doing what I do has gotten me like here and like where I'm supposed to be. So I feel like I'm living in purpose.
Yes. Do you feel like the quality of your relationships have improved?
Tenfold.
Yes.
Tenfold. Like besides meeting like great women,
Mm-hmm.
the great women that I have met that like love me for me have stuck around.
I was waiting for that part.
Yeah, it's few though. It was very few. Very few. And I never really had like a lot of male friends. 'Cause there's always like a competition or whatever. But like the core group that I have, it's just like my guys. So it's not like there's no trust issues. And it's like a completely different life to
Right.
where I sleep better, even though I get shitty sleep now, but it's still better.
Right.
I sleep better, and the things that like people see on the outside, I know how much it took to get here.
That's it.
You know, it was
Can I actually touch upon why you're having better relationships?
um
I'm gonna share with you why.
I feel like I'm having better relationships because I can be more honest with who I am to this person.
Indeed.
So it's more or less, I'm going to tell you who I am, and like you do with that information what you want, as opposed to like me being afraid to tell you and like you running off. Because like abandonment was like one of my biggest, core trauma issues, wounds. Yeah. So now I'm just me, and people see me and like, oh, this, that, and it don't really bother me because it's just me, and that's it. You got to take it or leave it, really.
Absolutely. So one mistake that a lot of people make is that they come into relationships with their mask on fully and want you to earn meeting the real self. And so what happens is when you present the mask and that person loves the mask, internal dialogue becomes, I don't feel loved by this person. This person doesn't love me. They don't hold themselves accountable to say, did I give them the real self to love, or did I introduce them to my mask and that's who they love? So as an example, if a man leads with money and that's his mask, right? His superficial mask of being able to provide financially, he's leading with that, and a woman continues to take and consume, he feels used. But he led with money, right? And so if a woman leads with sex and a man never takes her anywhere really nice, it is because she led with the mask around utilizing her body in order to get attention, affection, and time. And so he continues to treat her like that. So what happened for you is, based on you experiencing your authentic self, you're giving people an opportunity to actually love you because you're actually the one loving yourself. That's when people have those conversations around, you have to love yourself in order for people to love you. What that really means is self-love is simply acceptance, right? If anybody's ever wondering, like, what is self-love? What's the difference between self-love and self-care? Self-care are action-based methods that you can do in order to take care of yourself, your self-esteem, grooming, hygiene, mental health, and so on. Self-love is accepting all parts of you, the good, the bad, the ugly, and being okay with it. It is well with my soul. That is self-love. I don't need to, when you want to change yourself so bad that you criticize yourself, you're resisting the self. And so it persists, which is why some people can't get through bad habits. But when you accept that that's where you are, something miraculous happens, you get to change. So when you accept yourself for who you are, that's part of shadow work, right? Is accepting the good, the bad, and the ugly. You're no longer asking anybody to love your mask. And so now, because you're showing up, whoever actually gives you that attention to your real self, you feel it now, because the mask is not in the way of you experiencing the love inside of you. So that is super dope.
Again, it's more what's important to me where I am now, as far as like, say, in a relationship, cheating. Like, that's always the easiest thing to do, and it's so easy to cheat. So I always look at it as, how much of the undisciplined self am I giving up to do that?
Wow.
That's how I consider it now. As opposed to before, it was just kind of like, I know I could do it and get away with it. So now, like, if I were to cheat, it's more or less, I'm literally disappointing myself first, and I know that's going to eat me more up than anybody else. And I know I have to restart this whole, not restart, but I have to start from like where my transgression started, and I just don't want to do that.
Right.
So it's fucking tough.
Is it?
It's so tough. It's so tough. It's so tough. It's so tough. But
what's tough about it?
the lust, the lust is tough. Honestly, I love women. I love women. Like I love women. Oh my God,
The attraction.
I love women, and I love women that love women.
Mm-hmm.
That's the toughest part. Like women that love women, and then like there's women. It's the easiest way to connect to getting out aggression for me.
Got it.
So shit that goes on with work, shit that goes on with like shit that I got going on in life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I know it could all go away, or I feel that I know that I used to use sex as a tool to deflect from what was really going on.
Right.
And
Because a woman's body and presence is comfort, can provide comfort.
it's really, but see, that's the thing. Uh, it wasn't even that.
What
It
was
was
it
for me is the conquering. It was the little notches of like little notches added to my ego that made me feel more comfortable with going out to the world as how they see me as like this masculine. Oh, you work out, you whatever. But I tell somebody I cry, and I tell somebody like I'm in therapy, and then it's like, oh, what did you do that for?
Right.
You know. So it added to that, and just to not do that is, I just love women.
Right. The experience of it. So at present, with all the work that you've done, is there still that primitive
Absolutely.
desire?
I don't. Yeah.
I don't want it to be in the way that where we were talking about men, whether or not a man should be able to express vulnerability, and at what point in the relationship should he be able to express vulnerability to the point of crying. I wish that in the space of a man being in a relationship, he could do it as often as a woman can. But that is where I think that men do have it right in terms of it is dangerous. It is a gamble, I will say, expressing that level of vulnerability with a woman. Many women cannot handle and don't know what to do when a man gets to that point. So do I think that it's fruitful for a man to be able to express upset or frustration or cry at some point? I'm not saying a never, but I definitely would say it should not be as often as a woman. Because a woman, again, it goes back to if you are the protector of this in this relationship, but you're falling apart, I'm no longer going to feel safe. And when a woman is not feeling safe, she'll defer to her masculine energy. So it'll just be like an automatic response. And unfortunately, many men can't even act like that in front of his friends because male groups are notorious for heckling men, making fun of men when, oh, she cheated on you, bro, like, or oh, look, your marriage didn't work out. I told you it wasn't going to work out with her. And they won't hold that space. So he really doesn't have anywhere to go. Right? So it's a very fine line. I do wish that more men had the opportunity to be vulnerable with their woman. I'm not saying it's a never. I'm saying it's a gamble, and you need to read the room, right? You got to read the room with your woman to see, is this a good time? Can I be vulnerable with her and make that observation, right? So I think that for the men who are looking to secure a wife, when you get to that 5-6 month mark, something organic happens. I'm not saying force yourself to cry, but being vulnerable to share something that upsets you, something where you felt like you were going to go into a depression, and observe her reaction. You cannot fake body language. So have this conversation with her in person, right? Not over the phone. Have a conversation with her in person around something that was devastating to you, that really hurt you. Maybe when you thought you were just going to give up, you felt like you were just at your wit's end. Is she going to touch your hands? Is she leaning forward into you, or is she backing up? Right? Like backing up is a physical response to say, I'm not feeling safe. I don't want to get close. Is she getting close to you? Is she consoling you? Is she present with you? Is she asking questions around like having more details? That's how you'll know if somebody's interested in you. So, again, I wish that there were more opportunities for men in that way. That's why mental health and having those spaces are crucial for men. Being able to express your emotions is crucial for men. But it is true. I know the women are going to beat me up in the comments. They're going to tell me, no, my man cries in front of me and I still respect him. And so then maybe he established rapport. Maybe he established a level of respect. Maybe it's not as often, right? Or maybe you are a masculine woman, right? And you guys have a role reversal, so to speak. But majority of women in a healthy context need to know that the masculine frame is intact. He is firm. He is consistent. He is controlled, right? Like he has his stuff together. And when he doesn't, whether she acknowledges it or not, because perception is not necessarily, perception is your reality, doesn't mean it's the truth, right? So someone might, you think you want a man to cry. Women think, that's a projection. Women think they want a man to be soft. Women think that they want to see a man crying and emotional and he had a bad dream that somebody died and he wakes up and he's bursting into tears and she thinks she's going to console him. But once that moment is over, like that, she could lose respect for him.
Playing this never-ending chess match, because it seems like women ask for a strong, protective alpha male, aren't prepared for a strong, protective alpha male. And it seems like a lot of women really try to get these emotions out of you.
Right.
So it's almost as if they're playing a game to kind of strip you in a sense. Like I want to be able to break you down in my own way to see if I respect you.
Right.
And for a man, we're saying we want a safe space.
Right.
So it's almost like we're speaking two different languages.
Yeah.
And if women are looking for marriage, and not to be, just girlfriends or 5-year girlfriends, whatever you guys are talking about lately, how do we come together to where we can be vulnerable? You feel safe, we feel safe, and we don't have to necessarily hide these emotions that you're begging for us to have, while not being afraid that we won't be respected for showing them.
Absolutely. This is perfect. So there's a couple of things. And again, within context, I want you guys to consider this fact. People who have less respect for their bodies and have less purpose attached to how they pick are the ones that are procreating at larger amounts. People who have come from families that are still intact do not have a lot of children, right? Their offspring. We have far more people roaming this earth with no backing, right? No solid foundation from their family upbringing. So we have the people who are uneducated, right? Whether it's in the school or just in life, and they're having 16 kids apiece. And then you have other people who are focusing on their healing journeys. They're educated, whether that's educating yourself through life, through experiences, business, or formal education of some form, who are having 1 to 2 kids. These people who are having these 16 kids are not rearing them. They're not raising them. And now they are in their 30s. We talking crack, like the crack babies are growing, y'all. And they walk among us. And they act healthy and they look healthy. They speak well, right? They're well dressed. They make 6 figures that come from this, right? And we all know we have to stop playing like we don't know that your childhood can impact your adulthood. And there are droves of them walking among us looking very regular, right? When the crack epidemic hit and they didn't know the consequences, they had no clue that these babies that were on. So this is what the crack, for those who don't know what the crack epidemic is, and what I'm meaning to say by this is that there were people who started to get on crack cocaine, right? Instead of taking the line, they took a rock and they were smoking this rock. And what happened is that people started to have sex in order to support their habit, right? To be able to support their habit. And they started to have children. I mean, baby after baby after baby, broken home after broken home. We're talking about in the 80s. The 80s babies are grown. The 80s babies are in their 30s and 40s. The crack epidemic wasn't something that happened the moment they ingested the crack that it showed the fruit of the demise of our people. This is something that happened over time, and they've been observing it decade after decade after decade. And so what happened is that when these crack babies were born, some of them are very successful. And I'm not saying that it's just the crack babies, and I'm not trying to shame people who are coming from a family where there were drugs involved. The point in what I'm saying, and when I'm being slightly facetious when I'm saying this, is that there are people who come from family structures where they are lacking in mental stability, albeit drugs or some other form of abuse. And these people who don't necessarily work on their mental health and their physical health, right, are having children by the dozens. There's just more of them. And people who are conscious of their purpose and intentional with their seed, who are not spreading it all over the place, who are not just birthing babies by anyone, are having 1 to 2 kids apiece, 3 at maximum, right? There's just less who are coming from a generational foundation of health, physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health. So if you feel like the dating game and the dating scene is hard, it's because it is. It is hard. It is harder. It is harder to come from and find someone that has a strong family backing, which I've already mentioned, the intergenerational implication of having a person who is coming from a concentric circle of concentric degrees of separation between access to resources, including understanding, building wealth. So if you're here, you have access to your mom and dad, you have access to your aunts and uncles, you have access to your grandparents. And this concentric circle helps you remain focused, bullseye on your goals, your purpose, because you're just coming from years of wisdom. But we are now having people who are all starting from scratch. Those 16 babies that came from that family that's mentally unwell, every single one of those kids are starting from scratch. 16 people starting from scratch, creating more babies, 8, 9, 10, doing the same thing, and they walk among us. They're dating. They're getting married. They are in the schools. They are teachers. They have their professions. They're making 6 figures in IT. You can't tell just by looking at them for face value, like you can observe someone who might be on drugs, right? When you recognize the crack epidemic, they had a certain look. You can look at somebody's jaw. That jaw keep moving. You know you was on something, right? You start looking at how they talk. Start clicking, right? You're like, oh my goodness, they must have had a past. You cannot make those inferences now in that same way. It's just not as a parent, which is why you must vet and verify so that you can discern whether or not, even if your parents, even if you don't have that foundation, what is your purpose? Do you know who you are? Do you know what you're about? Do you know what pains you? Do you know what your focus is on? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where is your tangible plan? I don't think that women should ask men, do you love me? I think she should ask him, what is your plan? So that she knows, can I find myself in this? How are you executing this plan, right? So as an example, my sister, you know, her husband, he has his business and he has his 9 to 5. And she reformalized and, you know, rejiggered his entire business. They're doing excellent because she utilized her strengths. She's anal, type A. What's up, Tasha? I love you. She's type A, right? And she took her strengths and she was able to take his business that was already successful and she just amplified it and made it better, right? They made it better to where they're creating generational wealth in their family, right? So these things are important. But she found a way to make herself useful in a purpose he already had that predated her. He wasn't looking for her to help him identify his purpose. So this is for my 30s, because there are some people who are blessed and they meet the love of their life at like 16, 17, 18 years old. And it's legitimate. Like that's the love of their life and they have longevity. There are people that exist like that, far and few in between, but it exists. These are for the 30s. You're in your 30s, right? You're dating in your 30s. You cannot date like you're in your 20s. You cannot date like a teenager anymore. You cannot date for pleasure anymore. You cannot date for futile feelings They're frivolous. They're fickle. You can't date like that anymore. When you're in your 30s and up, that's the audience, right? If you're in your 30s and up, you must date for purpose. And that requires this of a woman. It requires a woman. So if a man understands his purpose, it requires a woman to understand her impact and her influence, right? So a woman has to understand and she has to have victory over her emotions when you're in your 30s.
A woman can have victory over her emotions.
So when you hear me say that, how do you imagine that looking?
I honestly imagine it looking like a logical male.
So I actually have a friend who is a logical male.
Okay.
She's a relationship coach too. Shout outs to Align with Allison. But she is an example of a woman who has victory over her emotions. However, here's the thing. Logic and emotions are not the same. So victory over your emotions doesn't mean logic.
Okay.
Victory over your emotions mean you have emotional regulation capacity.
I get that.
Right.
But that exists?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as a relationship coach, just a little bit of a background around even how I even really came into this field. I was married to my high school sweetheart, and it was a toxic relationship, and I didn't know that it was a toxic relationship. And I also grew up, I'm Haitian, American, and Christian. So I grew up very sheltered. So some of his behaviors that were unhealthy, I saw it as an opportunity to introduce Christ to him. I saw it as an opportunity to help him, which in today's time, that would be me trying to save him. But I didn't know that's what I was trying to do. So in the process of me trying to save him or help him or introduce Christ to him, I ended up hurting myself, right? Because he didn't mean to do the things that he was doing, right? If he knew the things that he was doing was going to hurt me in the way that it did, he would have never done it. I don't think that he was at all evil, but he was just doing what he knew. I didn't know that if I stayed in an environment like that, an unhealthy environment like that, that I would lose myself. That's exactly what happened. I was unrecognizable. So when we separated and I came back to my family and my friends because I was isolated from them for some time. So I came back to my family as a friend and everybody kept saying the same thing. What happened to you? That's the only way I knew that something was wrong. Because in my mind, I thought I was myself to some degree, just maybe matured. But to my friends and family, something had happened. Something devastating had happened, and they kept asking me what happened. I really genuinely didn't know. And I have a master's degree in social work. So I was already familiar. I just didn't know that I was experiencing emotional abuse in that way. I was so far removed from it. I was in denial, especially for the fact that this is the only relationship that I knew. I was with him from 16 till I was about like 31, right? So that's almost like 16 years of my life. So, from there, I decided when we separated, I had a major curiosity of mine, which is how can two people who love each other not work out? Is love enough? It became my burning desire to come to the conclusion of the matter. And I realized that yes, love is enough, but love is a conduit. It's not the point. So what I mean by that is love attached to something else is what matters, is what is enough, right? So there's a scripture in Corinthians that says, if I give charity, but I have not love, it's like I didn't do anything at all. Right? So if you're my man and I cook for you and I clean, but I do it begrudgingly, I do it with an attitude, at some point you're going to tell me, don't even cook for me. Don't clean up. Like if you're going to clean up, like don't do that. Mm-hmm. So love is not something that is an isolated thing. So people say like, you need love, you need respect, you need trust. That's not quite how the energy of love. Love is an experience that gets attached to something. So I wanted what I wanted with him because I loved him and I knew that he loved me. But how we were showing up was with a grudge. So it's like as if all that we intended to do with love, it's like we didn't do it at all. So all of his efforts, I couldn't receive it. All of the respect I tried to show him, he couldn't experience it. So we detached. We didn't grow apart because we were never growing together from the beginning. It was already a hard fracture. It was destined to fail without a lot of help. And we weren't going to get that help because he was very stoic and private. So there were things that I withheld even when we went to therapy that I didn't want to say because I didn't want to shame him because I knew his character. He doesn't like to feel exposed. So I held on to a lot of crucial information that would have helped us. I held on to it. So we couldn't get help. So when the relationship dissolved, that's when I really started on my journey to figure out first, what is love? Can two people who love each other, work it out or not work it out? What does this mean? I started to learn about feminine and masculine energy. And while I was in the process of embodying feminine energy for myself, it was as if a spiritual exchange happened. No lie. God ended up showing me what men experience. It's almost as if he gave me a second heart. When I experience a woman's plight and frustration, it feels completely different than when I'm materializing and understanding what God is sharing with me as far as what men experience. Men love deep. Women are long suffering. Women don't know that men love deep. And that is why, and what women don't recognize is that men are actually more loyal than women are. We exhibit this in our purchasing behavior. A woman will purchase, even if the hair product that she bought worked beautifully for her, she can't help it but to try another beauty product. If a man finds a body soap that works for him, he's going to have that body for the next 20 years. Yeah. Very loyal, very consistent. It's not that men don't have the capacity to do so. Of course, there's conditioning and social, inferences and learnings that we need. But the point is that it's possible. It is there. We just don't recognize it. So because men are stoic and because men say things like we want respect, we believe, first off, women don't even know what that means tangibly. What respect, what does that look like? And second of all, men actually crave emotional intimacy and connection. But public facing will say respect. But when you really begin to break down respect, there's an emotional tension, connection to that, right? There's this, he disrespected me, your feelings are hurt. You feel hurt. But we don't want to say that, so we'll say respect. So it becomes nuanced for a woman. You're not going to get respect from her because she doesn't understand that there's an emotional connection to intimacy. But if you speak in her language and say emotional intimacy and connection, you will feel respected. You understand? So there are times when I'm like burdened, emotionally burdened, when God is revealing and showing to me what men go through, experience the loneliness, the fear, right? Like I know that sometimes men don't want to say that they're afraid or they feel rejected, but it is, if it's not fear, then I would say terror and shock.
Yes.
I cannot even, I don't want to talk about it too much because I might end up crying, but that is how it feels. Knowing that men sometimes feel terrified when they have they recognize, if I don't make this work right now, there is no one to save me. Mm-hmm. When a woman says that, she can get government assistance. She can go to her sister's house and not get judged. She can crash out in somebody's place for years and it be understood. But when a man says he has no body, he has no one. It is different. And from that, I also began to learn more about what a healthy man looks like. So this is why I am successfully single. Because now that I understand what a healthy man looks like, it's almost like a catch-22. It's like I know too much now, right? So I know a little bit too much. And one of the things that I will say that I've put out there, and I will say, of all the things that's on my list, and I have 5 things on my list that I want from my man, one of them that is crucial is that he must have a mentor.